I stood there, the cake still resting on the trash lid in front of me, as their laughter filled the room. Mark, grinning with his beer in hand, didn't see me. Tracy, with her sharp words, didn't even care. "You said you didn't want a fuss," she had sneered. The words echoed, hollow and cruel. After raising them, after every sacrifice, I was nothing but a punchline. But I wasn't done yet. They would learn. They would see what happens when you push a mother too far. All right. Before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. On my birthday, they slid cake across a trash can lid. They laughed. I didn't. The dining room was dressed like a Pinterest board gone cold, plastic streamers sagging, a happy 70th balloon deflating in the corner, and a grocery store sheet cake sweating in its box. But no plates, no forks, just Tracy's shrill voice carrying through the house like a mosquito you couldn't swat. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Mother," Tracy said, hauling the cake out like it was leftovers. "You always said you didn't want a fuss, so we didn't make one." Elaine stood at the edge of the table, hands clasped, spine straight. Her cardigan sleeves were pulled neat to her wrists, fingers tight and still. The room smelled of microwave lasagna and indifference. Ashley hovered in the hallway, eyes flicking between her mother and her grandmother. She looked like she wanted to say something, but didn't. Not yet. Mark chuckled from the kitchen island, where he leaned back with a craft beer and a smug little smirk playing across his mouth. "Hey, we even improvised," he said, setting down the makeshift cake stand with a thud. It was the plastic lid of an outdoor trash bin, freshly wiped but unmistakable. "There," Tracy said brightly, setting the sheet cake down like she was delivering a roast duck. "It matches her worth." Elaine didn't blink. Her heart did something. Twitched, maybe. But her face held. They lit a single candle, off-center. Sang out of tune. No hugs, no toast. Just a few begrudging claps and the scrape of Mark's fork stealing the corner with the most icing. Ashley stepped forward. "Grandma, do you want—" "I'm fine," Elaine said quietly. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "You all went through the trouble. I wouldn't dare complain." Tracy rolled her eyes. "God, you're always so sensitive." Elaine forced a small smile and stepped away from the table. Her legs carried her to the living room, but her mind was somewhere colder. Someplace quiet. Tracy's laughter floated behind her like oil on water. Slick. Unshakable. The clock chimed 6 p.m. on the dot. Right on time, the party dissolved. Mark disappeared to watch a game. Tracy went outside to take calls that were suddenly urgent, and Ashley, after clearing a few cups, slipped out the front door with her keys clenched too tightly in her fist. Elaine didn't chase her, didn't ask for help. She just picked up the trash lid once everyone was gone and walked it out to the curb herself. Later that night, Doris Hill let herself into Elaine's house with a soft knock and her own copy of the spare key. She found her friend in the kitchen, seated at the table with a cup of black tea and a single paper napkin folded with military precision. "I saw the photos Ashley posted," Doris said. "That trash lid? They really did it, huh?" Elaine said nothing, just sipped her tea. "I'm sorry, hun." Doris pulled out a chair. "They don't know what you own." A pause. Then, "They will," Elaine said, eyes steady. Doris blinked. "Come again?" Elaine rose from the table with the poise of someone who had spent a lifetime not reacting. She walked slowly, measured, deliberate, to the hallway, where a small decorative cabinet stood beneath the framed photo of her late husband, Roger. She pulled the photo aside. Behind it, recessed into the wall, was a fireproof safe. She knelt, twisted the dial, clicked it open. Inside, neat and untouched, were rows of manila envelopes. Deeds, liens, contracts, co-signed mortgages, originals, signed and sealed. The kind of paperwork no one thinks you still have. The kind people forget you were ever smart enough to keep. Elaine pulled one folder free and laid it gently on the dining table. "Do you remember that second mortgage I helped them with?" she asked Doris without looking up. Oh, the one for the kitchen remodel? Pool they never built? Elaine nodded. I'm still on it. She flipped to a single page, circled two names, Tracy Brooks and Mark Brooks, then tapped her own signature, crisp at the bottom. They laughed at me on a trash can lid, Elaine said. Her hand, steady as a sniper's, drew a red pen from the drawer. And now, she said, circling the overdue balance in bold ink, I'll return the favor. They mocked me with garbage. I held their roof in my hands. The next morning, sunlight poured into the kitchen like nothing had changed, but everything had. Elaine moved with quiet precision, her reading glasses perched low on her nose as she spread the documents across the dining table. The folder was heavier than it looked, stuffed with old bank statements, copies of promissory notes, original lien filings. Every page was a memory they thought she'd forgotten. She hadn't. She traced her finger along the notarized line, second mortgage, Brooks residence. Below it, her signature, clean and elegant, cosigner. They'd come begging 15 years ago, Tracy and Mark in their Sunday best, fake humble smiles, asking for help just to qualify. It had felt good back then to be needed. Now, the balloon payment had matured and the account was months past due. Elaine tapped the overdue balance. It wasn't small. Not anymore. Doris wandered in from the porch, nursing her morning coffee, bathrobe half-tied. Well, she said, setting her cup down, it's not quite breakfast in bed, but this looks delicious. Elaine didn't smile. She pushed a stack toward her. Read the highlighted line. Doris peered through her own glasses. After a beat, she let out a long, low whistle. Second line holder, she muttered. Still active, still enforceable. My God, Elaine, you've got them by the foundation. They've missed payments since January, Elaine said. They ignored the letters from the bank. They think because it's quiet, it's dead. Doris laughed under her breath, tapping the documents with a crimson nail. Silver platter indeed. Elaine didn't react. She wasn't doing this for applause. That afternoon, upstairs in her room, Ashley sat on her bed, scrolling absently through her phone when the voices started downstairs. She paused her music and leaned toward the cracked bedroom door. Tracy's voice first, sharp, bored. She just sits there with her little tea like she's Queen Elizabeth. I swear, sometimes I think she forgets she's not important anymore. Mark chimed in, a half laugh tucked into his words. She should be thanking us. We let her live here for free, and still have to deal with her daily little guilt trips. Ashley's stomach turned. She slipped her phone onto the nightstand and rose quietly, every step calculated. Down the hall, she paused at the top of the stairs, listening. Tracy's voice again. One more weird look from her and I'm putting her in a home. Maybe one with better cake. Ashley turned away before they could hear her breath catch. Elaine stood in the hallway by the garage, her phone in one hand, the other resting lightly on the wall. She hadn't heard the whole exchange. Just enough. Enough to tighten her decision like a bolt. She tapped a name from her contacts and waited. 2 rings. Elaine, came the voice on the other end. Calm, dry, measured. Henry, she said. I'd like to initiate foreclosure proceedings, quietly for now. A pause. I see, Henry Price replied. I'll need the original documents and proof of payment lapse. Do you have those? I have everything. And you're prepared for what this might become? Elaine's voice didn't waver. They served me my birthday cake on a trash can lid. What happens next is their doing, not mine. Henry cleared his throat, no longer skeptical, only respectful. Then I'll begin the paperwork. You'll have options within the next 30 days. Elaine nodded once, even though he couldn't see it. Make sure the notice is served properly. I always do. She hung up, walked calmly back into the kitchen, picked up the trash lid Mark had left propped against the recycling bin and carried it out to the curb once more. This time, she didn't flinch. That night, Ashley returned home and found her grandmother at the kitchen table again. Papers cleared, tea brewed, nothing left behind but stillness. Ashley hovered in the doorway. Grandma. Elaine looked up. Yes, sweetheart. Ashley opened her mouth to speak, then hesitated. She studied her grandmother's face. Calm, unreadable, quietly steel. Nothing, Ashley said finally. Just, you seem different. Elaine smiled faintly, a glimmer of something unreadable in her eyes. Good. Let them laugh. She reached into the drawer, pulled out a small envelope stamped certified mail, and sealed it without looking at the contents. They gave me a lid. I taped a notice to their door. Monday arrived with crisp Texas air and a sky so clear it felt staged. Elaine stood at her mailbox just after 7 a.m., a soft cardigan draped over her shoulders and an envelope in hand. The label was unmistakable. Henry Price, Esquire, but it was what lay inside that truly mattered. Certified foreclosure documentation, properly initiated, perfectly timed. She slipped the envelope into the outgoing box, flag raised like a declaration of quiet war. Back inside, the morning played out like it always did. Tracy barked orders at no one from the kitchen. Mark shuffled through emails at the breakfast bar in his worn hoodie. Ashley stayed invisible. Elaine moved between them like vapor. By noon, the sheriff's cruiser rolled up with bureaucratic precision. No sirens, just the quiet authority of the state. A uniformed deputy stepped out, a stack of pre-filled forms in one hand, roll of blue painter's tape in the other. Elaine watched from the garden. Tracy opened the door in a satin robe and sleep mask still pushed up on her head. "Can I help you?" she snapped. The deputy didn't flinch. "Official posting, ma'am. Property at 3423 Westfield Lane is under foreclosure proceedings. Notice to vacate included in packet." He pressed the folded document against the front door, smoothing tape across all four corners. Tracy blinked. This has to be a mistake." Mark appeared behind her, barefoot and annoyed. "What the hell is this?" Elaine turned the corner of the porch path with surgical timing. "Not a mistake," she said calmly. "It's a correction." Tracy spun to face her. "You did this? What kind of sick game are you playing?" Mark narrowed his eyes. "You wouldn't dare foreclose. You can't. We live here. Your family." Elaine stepped up onto the porch with eerie composure. "I just did. And apparently, I can." Mark's jaw tightened. "We'll fight it. Legally." "Good," Elaine said. "Bring your best." Tracy glanced at the posted paper, scanned the bold text, and then looked back at her mother. Her voice came out quieter now, thinner. "Why would you do this?" Elaine met her daughter's eyes and didn't blink. "You handed me my worth on a trash lid. I'm simply returning the favor." From across the street, Doris Hill leaned against her powder blue Buick, arms crossed and lips pursed in approval. "First slice served," she muttered to herself, loud enough for the wind to carry it. Inside, Ashley peeked from the stairwell, frozen halfway down, breath shallow. Her parents still hadn't noticed her. Later that evening, Tracy stormed into the living room with a manila folder, flinging it onto the coffee table like it burned her. She had no right. "I want every file. Everything she signed. We'll find a way to undo it." Mark wasn't listening. He sat silently, eyes locked on the foreclosure notice now framed against the door like a scarlet letter. "You knew she was on the mortgage," Tracy hissed, snapping her fingers in front of his face. "Tell me you knew." He shrugged. "It was years ago. It was just to qualify. She was supposed to be dead by now." Ashley, standing behind the half wall to the kitchen, pressed a hand to her mouth. Back at Doris's house, Elaine sat at her friend's kitchen table sipping something stronger than tea for the first time in years. She was still in her gardening shoes. Her hands smelled faintly of rosemary and ink. Doris poured another inch of bourbon. "You're cold as marble, Elle." "No," Elaine said, turning the glass slowly in her hand. "I'm warm enough for justice." Doris lifted her glass. "To long games." Elaine clinked hers back. "And longer memories." That night, Mark stepped out to smoke and found one of the neighbors, Rick from 2 houses down, walking his dog across the street. Their eyes met. Rick nodded once, then looked away without stopping. Mark flicked the lighter 3 times before the flame held. The neighborhood had seen the notice. And the neighborhood remembered birthdays, too. They called me senile. I answered every question. The beige-walled courtroom buzzed with fluorescent silence, the kind that made time feel thicker. A government-issued clock ticked overhead like a slow metronome. Room 302 of the Dallas County Courthouse smelled faintly of lemon floor wax and anxiety. Elaine sat on the plaintiff's side, dressed in a navy blue suit that hadn't seen daylight in 5 years but still held its dignity. Her silver hair was pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, her posture unbending. She clutched a leather portfolio, not because she needed to. Henry had all the documents, but because she wanted her hands to have purpose. Across the aisle, Tracy fidgeted in a cream blazer poorly steamed, while Mark scrolled his phone until the bailiff gave him a warning glance. Their attorney, a cheap local generalist who looked barely old enough to drive, whispered something to them, clearly rehearsed. Judge Hollis entered briskly, robed and unreadable. Court is now in session. Tracy's lawyer stood first. Your Honor, we're seeking an injunction against the foreclosure action initiated by Mrs. Elaine Brooks on the grounds of diminished mental capacity. We believe she is being manipulated or is otherwise unfit to make complex financial decisions. Elaine didn't even flinch. Judge Hollis raised a brow. On what basis? She's 70. The lawyer offered, as if that alone were proof. A pause. Henry rose slowly from the opposing table, immaculate in charcoal gray. Your Honor, age is not incompetence. Mrs. Brooks handled financial contracts for 30 years as a bank clerk. She co-signed the mortgage in question. She's reviewed payment history, filed all proper notices, and has met every legal requirement to initiate foreclosure. Judge Hollis looked to Elaine. Mrs. Brooks, are you prepared to speak for yourself? Elaine stood. I am, Your Honor. Her voice was steady, clear, the kind of voice that had told screaming children to sit down and kept junior tellers from overpaying deposits. She answered questions about the loan, the payment history, even the notary's name on the original lien. Not once did she fumble. Not once did she ask for clarification. Mark shifted in his seat. Tracy chewed her thumbnail. Mrs. Brooks, the judge said finally, do you have any current diagnosis or medication that would impair your decision-making? No, Your Honor, and I brought a letter from my primary care physician to confirm that. She handed it to Henry, who passed it up without flourish. Judge Hollis glanced at it briefly, then looked to Tracy. Any witnesses besides yourselves to support your claim of diminished capacity? Tracy looked panicked. She's been acting different lately, just colder. Sneaky. She talks in circles. And how recently did that start? Since the notice, Tracy admitted. I see, the judge replied, clearly unimpressed. Just then, Ashley stood from the back row. She held a small stack of stapled papers. If it pleases the court, she said softly, I have records of text messages and emails between my parents. They include comments about manipulating Grandma, using her name on document, and threatening to put her in a care facility to shut her up. Judge Hollis motioned her forward. Ashley approached with hesitant steps and handed the packet to the bailiff. Tracy turned crimson. Ashley, sit down. Ashley didn't. The judge skimmed the papers, his lips pressed into a tight line. Well, he said finally, closing the file. Unless the petitioners have something stronger than character assassination and ageism, this case is dismissed. Mrs. Brooks is of sound mind and has the legal authority to proceed. Tracy gasped. This isn't fair. Judge Hollis's eyes pinned her. What's not fair, Ms. Brooks, is trying to exploit the system because you're suddenly facing consequences. He struck the gavel once. Dismissed. Elaine didn't smile. She just turned to Henry and whispered, Next step? Henry packed his briefcase. They're out of time. Outside the courthouse, the Texas sun burned bright against the stone steps. Reporters weren't there yet. This wasn't the kind of scandal they'd sniffed out. But people watched anyway. Strangers, interns, clerks. Mark stalked ahead toward the parking garage, jaw clenched. Tracy trailed behind, muttering to herself, yanking her heels off with one hand. Ashley walked beside Elaine. "You didn't even flinch," Ashley said. Elaine's voice was calm. "They tried to erase me in public. I chose to correct them. On the record. They laughed at trash. I auctioned their cars." The court dismissal was barely 72 hours old when the tow trucks arrived. Elaine didn't watch from the window. She didn't need to. The soft crunch of tires on gravel and the low growl of winches did the talking for her. She sat in Doris's sunroom, sipping chamomile and turning the pages of the Wall Street Journal like it was any other Thursday. Across town, Mark's detailing shop, Brooks Auto Concepts, sat with its metal roll-up doors wide open and its pride and joy parked right out front. A cherry red Dodge Challenger, wrapped matte black at the edges, custom rims, personalized plates, MRWINR. It was the first to go. By the time Mark arrived, sweat-drenched and mid-rant, the Challenger was already chained and lifting off the lot. His second BMW coupe followed minutes later. Inside the garage, 2 hydraulic lifts, leased under Mark's LLC, had already been tagged for removal. "What the hell are you doing?" he screamed, shoving past the repo officer. A second man, clipboard in hand, didn't even look up. "Court-approved auction. Defaulted lien on business assets. You were notified." "That lien was buried. It was from 5 years ago." "Nope," the man said calmly, flipping the page. "It was active and triggered." Mark turned, wild-eyed, just as a neighbor across the street lifted her phone to record. His stomach twisted when he realized she was live-streaming it. Back on Westfield Lane, Tracy stood frozen in their driveway, phone to her ear, pacing like a cornered animal. "They can't just take our cars, Mark. I have lunch at the club today. This is public." Elaine chose that moment to water the geraniums along the sidewalk, wearing a wide-brimmed straw hat and white gloves. Not a word passed between them. Just a slow, deliberate misting of the red blooms. "Are you behind this?" Tracy snapped, stepping off the driveway like she might actually confront her. Elaine didn't flinch. She didn't even look up. Tracy's voice cracked. "You've lost it. You're doing this to punish us." Elaine finally met her daughter's eyes. "Number, I'm doing this to remind you I was never as disposable as you treated me." She turned off the hose, coiled it with care, and walked back toward the house. Doris, who'd been sitting on the porch swing with a tall glass of sweet tea and oversized sunglasses, chuckled into her straw. One serving down. That night, Ashley slipped into Elaine's room quietly, avoiding every squeaky board like muscle memory. Elaine was at her writing desk, pen gliding across thick paper, her cursive old school and unforgiving. Ashley hugged her from behind. Not a teenage, half-hearted hug, but a full-bodied, silent grip around her grandmother's shoulders. She didn't say thank you. Didn't need to. The hug said it all. Elaine patted her hand once before going back to the envelope she was preparing. Meanwhile, in the garage, Mark tore through filing cabinets like a man in free fall. Bank notices, old contracts. Nothing made sense. The lien should have expired. Elaine should have been too old, too docile, too irrelevant to notice it, let alone activate it. Then he found it. A dusty manila folder tucked deep behind old maintenance logs. The original refinance application from 9 years ago, back when interest rates were climbing and he'd needed quick capital for an expansion that never panned out. Elaine's name was on the signature line. Neat, consistent, but not hers. The pen pressure, the slant, even the spacing. Mark knew it the second he saw it. He had signed her name. Back then, it felt harmless. Just one of those little things you do when the banks ask too many questions and the family name looks good on paper. Now, it was a felony. Tracy stormed in just as he dropped the folder. "We need damage control. You need to call someone. Sell the jet skis, the crypto, something." Mark didn't answer. "Mark?" He looked up slowly. Face pale, voice dry. "She never signed it." What? She never signed the refi. Tracy stepped forward, the color draining from her face. You forged it? I didn't think it mattered. A long silence followed, thick as wet cement. Then Tracy whispered, "Oh my God, she's going to bury us. They forged my hand. I raised it in court." Judge Hollis adjusted his glasses, then held up the document with 2 fingers, like it smelled off. "Mr. Price," he said, voice slow and razor flat, "you're telling me this signature on a $137,000 refinance application is not Mrs. Brooks's actual handwriting?" Henry Price, surgical as ever, nodded once. "We've had it examined by 2 forensic document analysts. Both reports are included in the packet, tabbed in red. Neither believes this is her signature." The courtroom shifted in its seat, soft murmurs, an audible inhale from someone in the gallery. Elaine sat still. Her hands were folded on her lap like she was waiting in line at the DMV. Across the aisle, Tracy's face had gone blotchy. Her breath came faster than it should have. Mark, by contrast, was frozen. Not blinking, not breathing, just waiting. Like a man standing on a trapdoor and praying it didn't creak. Henry continued, flipping 1 page forward. "The date of this refinancing coincides with Mr. Brooks's LLC expansion loan. The funds were deposited into his business account 2 days later. Mrs. Brooks was unaware of this filing until last week." Judge Hollis leaned forward. "Is that correct, Mrs. Brooks?" Elaine looked him in the eye. "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you wish to press charges?" She didn't answer immediately. Just watched the gears begin to turn, Tracy slowly turning toward Mark, realization finally sinking in. "I'd like a full fraud investigation," Elaine said. Calm, plain. Nothing more. Nothing less. Judge Hollis tapped his gavel once. "Motion granted. Court will appoint a fraud examiner to the case. In the meantime, I'm freezing all accounts tied to the original transaction." Tracy shot up. "Wait, what?" Hollis turned to her, unamused. "You co-benefited from a forged financial instrument. You'll have a chance to defend yourself once the investigation is complete. Until then, I advise you not to touch anything." Tracy's face contorted, somewhere between a scream and a sob. "This is his fault," she hissed, pointing at Mark. "He did this. I told him not to cut corners. I told him—" "You signed the checks," Henry interrupted without looking at her. Tracy sat down hard, like someone had pulled her bones out. In the corridor outside the courtroom, reporters were starting to hover. The story hadn't hit the news cycle yet, but the scent of scandal was in the air. Ashley stood beside Elaine on a bench by the windows, watching her parents argue by the elevator, all sharp whispers and finger-pointing. "They're destroying themselves," Ashley whispered. Elaine didn't speak, just smoothed a wrinkle in her slacks and blinked slowly. Behind them, Doris approached holding 2 bottled waters and a plastic-wrapped cinnamon bun. She handed them over like it was a church potluck. "Keep steady," she said, sitting beside Elaine. "You're ahead. Stay ahead." Ashley opened the cinnamon bun and tore a piece off for her grandmother. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. Elaine chewed slowly, then dabbed her lips with a napkin. "I'm tired," she said, "but not done." Meanwhile, inside the Brooks home, Tracy slammed the bedroom door so hard the picture of their wedding crashed to the floor. "You forged a federal document, Mark." He stood there, blank, unable to defend himself. She paced, hands shaking. "I swear to God, if we lose this house because of your stupidity—" "You weren't complaining when the check cleared. That's different. That was supposed to be clean." Mark's phone buzzed. A notification from one of his suppliers. "Account suspended. Payment flagged for legal hold." His stomach turned. "Tracy," he said, eyes wide. "It's happening already." Back at Doris's, Elaine sat in the guest room where she had been keeping her files. The sun filtered through gauzy curtains, dancing across the edge of the manila folders. She opened one labeled Personal Notes and added a single page. Fraud discovered. No reaction necessary. Yet. She slid it back into the file like it was just another recipe card. Then she picked up her phone and called Henry. "I'd like to move on the next lien," she said. "No hesitation," Henry replied. "That's what I like about you." Elaine's eyes narrowed. "I waited decades to be underestimated," she said. "Let them keep doing it. They called me worthless. Their credit said otherwise." The call came at 8:17 a.m. Tracy, still half asleep, swiped at her phone with one acrylic nail and answered with a groggy, "Hello? Ms. Brooks?" The voice was clipped, professional. "This is Capital River Bank's Collections Department. We're calling to notify you that your line of credit has been suspended due to ongoing foreclosure and fraud proceedings tied to your co-owned residence." Tracy sat up straight. "Wait. What? No, there must be some mistake. My score's in the 700s. "Your score was in the 700s, the woman corrected. "It is now 582. Tracy froze, blinking at the ceiling. "Ma'am, we'll need you to update your billing information within 72 hours or the accounts will be escalated to legal collections." Tracy opened her mouth, but the line had already gone dead. On the other side of town, Mark's morning wasn't faring better. His phone lit up like a dying Christmas tree, texts from two major investors pulling out of his latest detailing expansion. Another message, curt and final. "We can't be tied to pending fraud litigation. Good luck." He dropped the phone on the edge of his workbench, knuckles white. Outside the bay door, his garage stood mostly empty. No Challenger, no BMW. Just one customer car with a rusted bumper and a check engine light that wouldn't stay off. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was his bank app. Business account. Minus $176.42. He laughed once. Short, dry, bitter. Meanwhile, back in the neighborhood, Elaine's roses were in bloom. Doris stood beside her on the walkway, sunglasses perched high, watching Tracy pull out of the driveway in an Uber, wearing oversized sunglasses and what looked like a fake smile glued over panic. "She's melting down," Doris said, sipping from her thermos. "You can practically see it through the windshield." Elaine snipped a faded bloom and dropped it into the compost bucket. "That's what happens when you build a life on debt and gossip." "They're saying things, you know," Doris added. "The neighbors." Elaine looked at her. "They're saying you're beating them, and they're not wrong." Elaine didn't smile. "I'm just holding them accountable." Doris lifted her glass. "To accountability, then." That evening, after the house fell quiet, a car pulled up quietly to the side alley of Doris's property. Ashley stepped out with two duffel bags and a backpack. Elaine opened the back door before she even knocked. "Your room's made up," Elaine said. Ashley's eyes welled, but she blinked it away. "They didn't even notice I left." "I know," Elaine replied. They stood there for a second, silence stretching gently. Ashley stepped inside and dropped her bags. "I don't want to be them." Elaine tilted her head. "Then don't." Ashley nodded. "I won't." Elaine reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Respect isn't bought," she said. "It's earned." The next morning, Tracy returned to find Ashley's room gutted, closets empty, drawers open. She tore through the house like a cyclone. "Ashley! Mark?" Mark didn't answer. He was on the phone in the garage again, arguing with a payment processor, eyes hollow. Tracy flung open the back door and scanned the street. But Elaine's car wasn't in the driveway next door. And the porch looked too calm, too untouched. She slammed the door and screamed into the empty kitchen. From across the street, Doris watched from her Buick, a single eyebrow raised. She rolled down her window and spoke to no one in particular. "She's just getting started." That night, Elaine and Ashley sat on the couch together, a steaming pot of cocoa between them. The TV was off. No distraction. Ashley looked around the cozy space. The flower arrangements, the faint ticking of an old brass clock, the warmth of someone choosing peace even in the middle of war. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "The house?" Elaine sipped her cocoa. "I miss what it used to be, not what it became." Ashley leaned on her shoulder. "You feel like home now." Elaine didn't say anything. She just held her granddaughter's hand. Then the doorbell rang. Elaine set down her cup. Ashley started to rise, but Elaine stopped her with a light touch. "I've got it." She walked to the door, opened it slowly. A courier in a windbreaker stood there, holding a red envelope. "Certified delivery for Mrs. Elaine Brooks." She signed, closed the door. And as she turned the envelope over in her hands, her eyes narrowed. It wasn't addressed from the bank. It was from the county clerk's office. "They gave me trash. I gave them an auction block." August sun cracked through the courthouse windows like a silent countdown. Room 104, Dallas County Property Auctions, was packed tighter than usual. A folding table sat up front like a judge's bench, manned by a clerk with a gavel, a laptop, and a printed list of doomed properties. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, as if even they were nervous. Elaine stood near the back, dressed in gray linen and quiet authority. Henry Price stood beside her, legal pad tucked under one arm, tie crisp, demeanor flatter than courtroom drywall. Ashley was just behind them, hair tied back, expression unreadable, but her gaze never left the double doors. Tracy and Mark burst through those very doors with 3 minutes to spare. Tracy wore heels too high for marble floors and a panic that clung to her like perfume. Mark's button-down was rumpled and damp from sweat. He scanned the room like someone looking for a miracle, finding none. Elaine didn't turn. The clerk cleared his throat and tapped the mic. "Next item on the docket, 3423 Westfield Lane, single-family residential. Foreclosure initiated under secondary lien claim. Starting bid, $225,000, Tracy pushed forward. "We're here. We can stop this, right?" The clerk didn't even blink. "Not without a cashier's check covering the full amount." Mark turned to her, whispering harshly, "Did you bring anything?" Tracy shook her head. "We don't have it. You said we'd stall it." Elaine, motionless at the back, leaned toward Henry. "Now," she said softly. Henry nodded, stepped forward, and raised his bidder's paddle, marked discreetly with a trust name, Silver North Holdings. "Bid. $225,000, he called out. The room stilled. No counter, no movement. Just the sound of Mark's breathing turning erratic. "Going once," the clerk said. Tracy lunged forward. "Wait." "Going twice." Mark tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. "Sold," the clerk declared, "to Silver North Holdings." The gavel hit wood. Just like that, the house was no longer theirs. Outside, the air was thick and metallic. The courthouse steps stretched like a stage, and the audience was growing. A reporter with a notepad, a neighbor with a camera phone, a deputy pausing beside his cruiser. Everyone sensed something had broken. Tracy exploded. "You evil, conniving witch!" she screamed, spinning to Elaine. "You bought it back just to humiliate us." Elaine didn't flinch. Mark sat on the bottom step, head in his hands. His tie hung like a noose undone. "You planned this," Tracy shrieked. "The trust, what even is that? You think hiding behind lawyers and shell names makes you clever?" Elaine stepped down slowly, 1 foot at a time. When she reached the sidewalk, she turned toward her daughter and said, "No, Tracy, I don't think it makes me clever." She paused, let the air settle. "I think it makes me thorough." Ashley, still behind her, allowed herself the smallest smile. From across the lot, Doris Hill leaned against her car with sunglasses on and a single iced coffee in hand. She raised the plastic cup like a toast. "That's the silver platter," she murmured. That evening, Tracy stood in the now stripped kitchen of the house she no longer owned, staring blankly at the granite countertops. A single eviction notice, red and final, lay on the counter like a scarlet letter. Mark hadn't spoken in hours. He sat on the floor of the empty living room, phone dead, wallet thinner, pride evaporated. "I don't know where to go," Tracy said, voice cracking. Mark didn't answer. She walked to the window and looked out across the street. Elaine's house glowed warm from within. Lamps on, windows open, and silhouettes, 3 of them, sharing dinner at a round table. Inside, Ashley cleared the dishes. Doris opened a fresh bottle of wine. Elaine sat at the head of the table, folding linen napkins like nothing in the world had just changed. But everything had. They tried to leash my future. I cut them from it. 2 weeks after the house was gone, the courthouse filled again. This time not for property, but for blood. Tracy had filed an emergency motion to contest Elaine's estate plan, claiming undue influence and mental duress. Her attorney was a bigger name this time, one with television ads and a flashy cufflink habit. But flash didn't change facts, or wills, or witnesses. Elaine sat at the center of the bench, her expression unreadable. Her pearl earrings were back. So was the steel in her spine. Ashley sat just behind her, calm but braced. Henry Price organized folders at the counsel table with the precision of a surgeon prepping for a quiet but lethal operation. Across the aisle, Tracy looked worse for wear. Her skin was pale beneath a thick mask of makeup, and her dress, too formal for the filing, hung oddly on her frame, like it didn't belong to her anymore. Mark sat beside her, silent, unmoving, as if the wind had been punched out of him weeks ago and never returned. Judge Hollis called the room to order. "Let's begin with the petitioner," he said, already sounding tired. Tracy's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we are requesting a review of Mrs. Brooks's amended estate plan, filed last month under suspicious timing. We believe the will was rewritten under emotional coercion by a third party, specifically her granddaughter, Ashley Brooks, and does not reflect Mrs. Brooks's long-standing intentions." Elaine didn't blink. Henry rose, calm as ever. "Your Honor, the new will was filed with a notary, a physician's statement, and a financial advisor's signature, all three present at the signing. Mrs. Brooks was of sound mind. The only coercion in this room is the desperate kind." Hollis turned to Elaine. "Mrs. Brooks, are you prepared to speak?" Elaine stood, voice as clean as cut glass. "I updated my will because life handed me clarity. My estate belongs to the person who stood beside me, not the ones who stood over me." She glanced back, just once, at Ashley. Tracy's voice broke. "You're just punishing us. You're letting her take everything." Elaine turned back to the judge. "I'm giving her exactly what you both expected from me. The difference is, she earned it." The courtroom fell silent. Hollis tapped his pen once. "Motion denied. The will stands. All previous claims are dismissed." He struck the gavel without ceremony. Ashley exhaled like she'd been underwater. Across the aisle, Tracy crumpled into the seat next to Mark, hands shaking. "I can't believe she did this," she whispered. "She left us nothing." Mark didn't respond. His court-issued fraud investigators sat 2 rows behind him, waiting patiently for their follow-up hearing. Later that day, back in Elaine's kitchen, Doris flipped through a folder while Ashley set out sandwiches. "Are you sure you want to go public with this part?" Doris asked. Elaine nodded. "It's time." Ashley handed her grandmother a pen and a press release draft. Elaine signed it without hesitation. That evening, local news broke the story. Foreclosure proceeds fund housing project in retired clerk's name. Elaine had quietly donated $100,000 of her foreclosure windfall to seed a nonprofit housing trust for seniors and single mothers to be built on the east side of Dallas. The project would be called Silver Platter Homes. When asked for comment, Elaine offered only one sentence: "Humiliation doesn't have to be permanent. It can be repurposed." Ashley printed out the article and taped it to the fridge. Doris just raised her glass and said, "Now that's legacy." Across town, Tracy watched the news segment on a grainy motel TV. The closed captions stuttered as Elaine's name flashed across the screen in bold, elegant lettering. Mark was passed out on the bed behind her, still in his shirt from court, one shoe on. Tracy muted the sound and stared at the screen. The woman she tried to control now had buildings named after her. She grabbed the motel phone and dialed a number. "Yes," she said to the voice that answered. "I need to talk to someone about contesting a charitable trust." A pause. No, I'm not the donor. Her eyes burned. I'm the daughter. They gave me humiliation. The city gave me honor. The headline ran front page above the fold in the Dallas Chronicle Sunday edition, From Trash Lid to Trust Legacy. Local senior flips foreclosure into housing hope. Beneath it, a full-color photo of Elaine, framed in soft morning light outside Doris's porch, holding a simple manila folder and half a smile. No makeup, no PR team, no staged backdrop, just authenticity. That's what made it sing. Ashley read the article aloud at the breakfast table, her voice bright with pride. 70-year-old Elaine Brooks, a retired bank clerk and recent victim of intrafamily foreclosure abuse, has quietly funded the launch of Silver Platter Homes, a community housing trust that will serve at-risk seniors and single mothers. When asked for comment, Brooks simply said, "Humiliation doesn't have to be permanent. It can be repurposed." Doris snorted. That quote? Legendary. Ashley nodded. They called it intrafamily foreclosure abuse. That's got bite. Elaine just stirred her tea. Outside, birds chirped on the porch rail. The neighborhood was quieter than usual. No leaf blowers, no dogs barking. Just the slow crawl of shifting opinions. Within hours, the article spread online like ivy, reposted by advocacy groups, shared on community boards, tweeted by local council members. Facebook comments flooded in. Elaine Brooks is what a matriarch should be. That daughter should be ashamed. Silver Platter Homes? That name alone deserves a Pulitzer. You don't mess with grandmas in Texas. Underneath, someone had found and reposted the now infamous trash lid birthday photo Ashley had once deleted. It showed Tracy smirking, cake sagging on the plastic, and Elaine sitting off to the side, invisible to everyone but the camera. It was being shared now as a before shot. A look, what she rose from moment. The comments weren't kind to Tracy. Disgusting. Who does that to their own mother? And she wonders why she was cut out. By mid-afternoon, Tracy had deactivated her account. That evening, Doris and Elaine took a walk through the neighborhood, arms looped casually, as if everything hadn't just changed. People waved from porches, people who hadn't looked twice at Elaine in years. One woman called out, "You're a force, Mrs. Brooks." Elaine nodded, but didn't slow her pace. Doris glanced at her. "You're famous now. You okay with that?" Elaine exhaled. "I'm okay with why." They rounded the corner, heels tapping in rhythm against the concrete. Doris smiled. "You know what this is, right?" "What?" "Poetic justice." Elaine's reply came after a long moment. "It's still justice." Back at home, Ashley printed a second copy of the article and laminated it, then tucked it inside the front page of Elaine's legacy folder. She'd been updating the trust documents, expense reports, even printing early designs for the housing project. Elaine hadn't asked her to. She just did it. "You're building something real," Doris had told her the day before. That's what happens when women are raised on consequences, not entitlement. Ashley believed it now more than ever. Elaine entered the room holding a fresh envelope from Henry. No words, just a nod as she handed it to Ashley. Inside, projected sale dates for the first Silver Platter Homes property lot. Ashley gasped. "You're actually doing it." Elaine's voice was quiet. "We're doing it." They stood there for a second, 3 generations of rage, loss, and redirection funneled into something durable. But across town, inside a small lawyer's office on Mockingbird Lane, Tracy Brooks sat stiff-backed, biting the corner of a legal pad. Her new attorney scrolled through the Chronicle article on his iPad. "This'll be tricky," he said. "Charitable trusts are ironclad when properly structured, especially one already filed with the Secretary of State." Tracy leaned forward. "There's got to be a loophole. Something. I'm her daughter." He hesitated. "Being related isn't the same as being entitled." Her jaw clenched. "I want everything she's touched investigated, every bank record, every trust disbursement. I'll find the crack." The lawyer glanced up. "It'll be expensive." Tracy stared at the screen where her mother's face now lived in headlines and hashtags. I don't care. They wanted my humiliation. They got headlines. The mugshot ran front and center in the Dallas Morning Ledger's Tuesday crime column, wedged between a pawnshop robbery and a teacher arrested for DWI. But this one got attention. Mark Brooks, 45, indicted for felony fraud in mortgage scheme. Underneath, the face of a man no longer smug, hair matted, shirt collar crumpled, eyes bloodshot with something between regret and fury. The article was blunt, outlining forged signatures, fraudulent refinance, misuse of cosigner status, and the resulting foreclosure of a family home. The final line sealed it. Investigators confirm that victim Elaine Brooks is not pressing criminal charges. However, the state has elected to proceed. The word victim landed harder than the indictment. The fallout wasn't subtle. Tracy stepped into the country club lounge 2 days later and felt the atmosphere shift. Whispers clipped short, glances dropped awkwardly. No one greeted her. No one asked about her family. Her name had been scrubbed from the fall charity gala invitation. By the time she reached the coffee bar, even the barista wouldn't meet her eye. She left without ordering. Meanwhile, Elaine tended to her herb garden. Sun hat low, gloves clean. Her mint plant was struggling, but the rosemary flourished, stubborn and fragrant. Ashley read the article aloud from the patio chair, her voice carrying just enough to make Doris, inside, snort into her iced tea. They used your name, your credit, and your silence, Ashley said. And now they get to explain themselves to a judge. Elaine clipped a few sprigs of thyme. Let the courts do what they do. I've done what I needed. Ashley set the paper aside. They can't touch you now. No, Elaine said, but they'll try. Doris stepped out with a grin. Let them. They're swinging from a rope they tied themselves with. Elaine nodded but said nothing. Her calm wasn't performative. It had calcified into something solid. Ashley looked at her grandmother, eyes steady. Are you angry? Elaine thought about it. No, she said. Just finished. That evening, Elaine sat at her dining table with Henry Price. Papers spread neatly before them. Trust disbursements, property registrations, beneficiary adjustments. Ashley watched from across the room, taking notes on her laptop. Henry flipped to the final page. There's just one document left. Elaine didn't look at it right away. Instead, she stared out the window, where the last of the sun was painting the lawn in gold. Doris entered with a glass of wine and leaned against the doorway. You've served most of the meal, she said. One last slice left. Elaine turned from the window. The will, she said quietly. Henry slid the draft across the table. Elaine picked up the pen. Across town, in a rented Hyundai, a private investigator sat parked outside Elaine's property line. His binoculars rested on the dash, but his laptop screen glowed with browser tabs, trust deeds, tax filings, court records. He clicked through each document, frowning. Everything was airtight. Filed months ago. Publicly reported. Not a single transfer had Elaine's name on it directly. It was all under Silver North Holdings. Tracy's voice came through the phone speaker, scratchy and impatient. Anything? The investigator sipped burnt coffee. She's clean. She's been clean. Tracy's voice cracked. Then dig deeper. The line went dead. Back at the house, Ashley stood at the sink, rinsing dishes, watching her grandmother and Henry review final clauses. Doris refilled glasses. Everything felt still, whole. Ashley looked over her shoulder. What comes after this? Elaine folded her copy of the new will. Peace, she said. If they let me have it. They left me with trash. I left them nothing. The document stretched across the dining table like a closing argument. Pages crisp. Language airtight. Legacy rewritten. Elaine read every word. Not because she had to. Henry had walked her through each clause the day before. But because she believed in witnessing her own final moves. That was something Tracy never understood. Power wasn't in the act. It was in the awareness. Ashley sat beside her, eyes on the signature lines. She hadn't spoken since Henry left, hadn't asked to see the contents. Elaine noticed. Across the room, Doris tapped a stamp pad twice and pressed her notary seal into the corner of the final page. All set, she said. You want a moment alone with it? Elaine didn't answer. She reached for the pen. The signature landed with weight. Ink, slow, unapologetic. Elaine Brooks. Then, quietly, she turned the will back over, reached beneath the table, and pulled out a small lockbox. She removed a second, much older will. One written years ago, back when Roger was still alive and Tracy's voice still carried affection instead of expectation. Elaine lit a match, held it steady. The paper curled inward, darkening around the names of Tracy and Mark. The flames licked up the edges until all that remained was a soft pile of ash in the silver basin. Ashley watched with wide eyes. That was the old one? Elaine nodded. There's only one version now. She locked the new will inside the fireproof safe, sealed it, then tucked the key into a manila envelope marked for Henry and placed it on the sideboard. Ashley approached slowly. You're really leaving them nothing? Nothing legal, Elaine said. They'll inherit enough in public record. Ashley stood silently, her face unreadable. And then, suddenly, her eyes filled. Elaine turned to her. Do you think I'm being cruel? Ashley shook her head. Number, I think you're finally telling the truth. Elaine nodded. It took too long. Doris stepped beside her, glass of water in one hand, the notary stamp in the other. Most women wait a lifetime to claim what's theirs. You waited a little less. Elaine chuckled softly, the sound dry but warm. She turned to the two women flanking her now, one from her past, one from her future, and said with calm finality, they'll dine on silence, and they'll know who cooked it. Ashley covered her mouth with one hand and blinked fast, trying not to cry. Doris squeezed her shoulder. It's okay, baby. You just watched a dynasty end. That's supposed to feel like something. Across town, Tracy stared at a letter on her motel room bed. It was from her old bank. Her final appeal to unlock a frozen account had been denied. The rejection was stamped in bold red across the top. She let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. Mark was in the next room, on the phone with his lawyer again, repeating the same phrase over and over. Can we delay sentencing? They were still technically married, still legally liable, still sharing the same fall. Back at Doris's, Elaine placed the notarized will into a safety envelope, ran a strip of tape across the back, and handed it to Ashley. Take this to Henry's tomorrow, she said. Straight to him. No one else. Ashley took it like it was sacred. Elaine looked at her for a long moment. This isn't just about cutting people out. It's about cutting the cord. Ashley swallowed. You don't owe anyone anything. Elaine looked toward the window. Night was falling in slow, warm layers. Not anymore, she said. They brought the trash lid. I brought the front porch. It began with a knock. Not tentative, not polite. Loud, insistent, ragged. Elaine set her tea down, walked to the door, and opened it to find Tracy on the porch. Disheveled, tear-streaked, makeup smudged into ghostly rings beneath her eyes. She didn't speak. She dropped to her knees. I have nothing left, Tracy whispered. Please, please, Mama. Elaine stood unmoving, one hand on the doorknob, the other resting lightly against the frame. Calm as marble, dressed in pale blue linen that made her look like memory itself. Behind her, Ashley stood just beyond the curtain, silently raising her phone. The red dot blinked alive. Not for vengeance, but for history. Outside, the neighborhood stirred. Two porch lights flicked on. A curtain twitched across the street. And Doris Hill, sipping lemonade from her lawn chair, leaned forward just slightly and whispered to no one in particular. Silver platter served. Tracy sobbed harder. You made your point. You've destroyed us. You've humiliated me. What more do you want? Elaine's voice was low, crystalline. Forgiveness is free, Tracy. Money isn't. Tracy looked up, eyes desperate. I'm your daughter. Blood has to count for something. Elaine tilted her head, ever so slightly. Blood counted, she said. Until you watered it down with greed. Tracy grabbed for the hem of her dress, clinging like a child in a flood. Just help me. Give me something. Anything. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again. Elaine didn't step back. But she didn't offer a hand either. You already disappeared, she said. Years ago. Tracy's sobs broke into something hoarse and animal, the sound of someone who finally understood the last door had closed. From the window, Ashley's eyes welled, not out of pity, but because she had never seen a fall look this complete. The same woman who served cake on a trash lid now knelt on the welcome mat she never respected. Elaine bent slightly, not to help, but to meet her daughter's gaze one final time. I hope you learn, she said, but not on my dime. Then she stepped inside and closed the door. Inside, silence. Elaine turned the bolt, slowly, then exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. Her hands were steady, her face unreadable. Ashley lowered the phone. Was that too far? Elaine looked at her. Was the lid too far? Ashley shook her head. I've never seen you like that. Elaine poured herself a glass of water and took a sip. This is what boundaries look like, she said. They're not loud. They're firm. 2 days later, Elaine sat with Henry Price in his downtown office, signing the final disbursement order. He watched her closely. You're sure about this? Elaine nodded. I told you. I waited my whole life to be underestimated. I don't plan on wasting the result. Henry turned the document around. Then we'll begin the transfers. The first transaction, a full scholarship fund in Ashley's name. Tuition, housing, books, and a living stipend, paid in full. The second, an additional $250,000 invested into Silver Platter Homes, now incorporated and receiving inquiries from 3 separate city districts. Elaine initialed both lines, then folded her hands and sat back. There, she said. That's the end of their chapter, and the start of hers. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, Ashley opened an envelope left for her on the kitchen counter. Inside, her college acceptance letter, and a handwritten note. You never needed to inherit my name. You've built your own. E. Ashley pressed it to her chest. Doris peeked in from the patio and grinned. Kid, you better start clearing a shelf. Legacy's coming in hardcover. But across town, Tracy sat alone in a borrowed car outside a strip mall law office, phone in hand. She stared at her reflection in the cracked screen. And for the first time, there was no plan, no backup, only silence, and the sound of her own name no longer being whispered, because it no longer mattered. They gave me plastic. I built concrete. The ribbon was silver, not red, not blue, not festive, just silver. Thick, dignified, and gleaming beneath the Texas sun like polished resolve. A crowd had gathered in the newly poured courtyard. The first Silver Platter Homes building stood behind them, pale brick, clean siding, wide windows. Nothing extravagant, but solid, permanent, real. Elaine stood at the center of it all, dressed in soft charcoal with a pearl brooch that once belonged to her mother. Her cane stayed at home. Her posture did not. Doris hovered near the refreshment table, fanning herself with the printed program. Ashley stood at the podium. She'd grown into it. The blazer, the voice, the weight of the moment. This, she said, is what happens when a woman chooses dignity over vengeance. When a legacy is rewritten not with bitterness, but with blueprints. She glanced toward Elaine, who didn't move, but her eyes held everything. Ashley continued. My grandmother was handed disrespect. She turned it into shelter, into structure, into hope, applause. Honest, rising applause. A few feet back, city officials clapped along. 2 reporters scribbled notes. A man from the housing department filmed with his phone, already talking about syndicating the speech online. Elaine didn't smile. She just placed one hand against the new stone wall beside her, as if grounding herself in what couldn't be undone. Later, After the ribbon had been cut and the cameras put away, Doris joined her on the edge of the new community garden plot. "Well," she said, sipping punch from a paper cup. "They're naming benches after you now. I think you've officially arrived." Elaine exhaled. "It's not about arrival, it's about replacement." "Of what?" Elaine looked across the courtyard at Ashley, still talking to a councilwoman, holding her own, laughing now. "Of what I thought legacy was supposed to look like," she said. "This is better." The plaque was simple. Silver Platter Homes, founded by Elaine Brooks, in honor of every woman told to sit quietly. No mention of Tracy. No hint of Mark. They had faded. Slowly. Then suddenly. Tracy hadn't been seen in weeks. Rumors said she moved out of state. Others said she changed her last name. No one bothered to confirm. Mark's sentencing hearing had been pushed back, but no one cared to attend. At dusk, Ashley and Elaine stood alone in front of the building. The press had left. The neighbors had gone home. Only the crickets and the new porch lights remained. Ashley leaned on her grandmother's shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. Elaine shook her head. "We did it." They stood that way a while, letting the silence wrap around them. Then Ashley said, "Do you think they'll ever come back?" Elaine didn't ask who she meant. "They might," she said. "But this time, the door won't open." Ashley nodded. From behind them, Doris's voice rose through the night like a benediction. "Well, I guess you finally served the whole damn meal." Elaine turned, just once, and gave her the smallest smile. "Not yet," she said, "but dessert's on the way." They served me cake on a trash can lid. I served them foreclosure on a silver platter, and left with dignity they could never taste. The table was round, always had been. Elaine liked that about it, how no one sat at the head, how every seat was equal. That night it was draped in deep navy linen, layered with simple white china and the glow of 3 unscented candles. Nothing grand. Just right. A roast rested in the center. Garlic, rosemary, salt. The scent filled the room like memory, old Sunday dinners, years before anything had cracked. Elaine carved with quiet hands while Doris poured the wine, and Ashley lit the last candle near the window. The flame flickered against the framed copy of the Silver Platter Trust document, now mounted in gold trim and tucked between a vase of daisies and a stack of books titled Women Who Changed Their Lineage. There were no place cards. They knew where they belonged. Doris settled in first, stretching her legs with the comfortable sigh of someone who'd earned her seat. Ashley slid into hers, cheeks pink from wine and candlelight, her eyes softer than they'd been in months. Elaine joined them last, napkin in her lap, hands folded for a moment of stillness before the meal began. No toast, no speeches, just the soft sound of forks on porcelain and the quiet of a house that finally had nothing left to defend. Halfway through the meal, Ashley set her utensils down and looked across the table. "You know," she said, "this wasn't revenge." Elaine looked up. "This was reclamation." Elaine tilted her head. "You think there's a difference?" Ashley nodded. "Yeah. Revenge ends when they hurt. Reclamation ends when you heal." Doris leaned back, impressed. "Well, damn. Somebody write that down." Ashley smiled, then turned to her grandmother again. Her voice dropped, not for effect, but because it had weight. "You gave me more than inheritance," she said. "You gave me strength." Elaine didn't answer right away. She let it settle. Then she reached across the table and covered Ashley's hand with her own. "You were strong before you knew my name was worth carrying," she said. Doris raised her glass again. And to think, they thought the trash lid was the punchline. Elaine finally laughed. Not sharp, not bitter. Just a full, quiet laugh that emptied the last bit of weight from her chest. "No," she said. "The punchline's what I left them with. After dessert, cherry pie, made the way Roger liked it." Doris cleared the dishes while Ashley picked up the trust frame and held it for a long, silent beat. "I still can't believe it," she whispered. "All of this. From what they tried to bury you under." Elaine stood by the window now. arms crossed gently, watching the porch lights blink on across the neighborhood. "I didn't rise from ashes," she said. "I was never burned. I just stopped letting them set the fires." Ashley stepped up beside her. "Do you think they'll ever say sorry?" Elaine didn't turn. "Maybe. But that's for them to carry." Doris entered with a fresh pot of tea and set it gently on the table. "I don't think they have the stomach for it," she said. "Not everyone can taste humility, not after dining on entitlement for that long." Elaine nodded once, the shadows of candlelight brushing her cheekbone. "Then they'll stay hungry," she said. Later, as Ashley packed up leftovers and Doris gathered her keys, Elaine walked into the study. She stood before the small wooden cabinet in the corner, the one that had once held ledgers, then lawsuits, then locks. She reached inside and pulled out a velvet cloth. Wrapped in it, the final copy of her memoir manuscript. Just 3 words on the cover. "Silver platter served." She placed it on the desk, beside the framed trust, and smiled. Then, softly, to no one but the room, "They served me cake on a trash can lid. I served them foreclosure on a silver platter, and left with dignity they could never taste."